Okay, so you want to own a hardware store. Find a building, stock the shelves with hammers and screws and paint, unlock the doors every morning, and watch people hand you money for things they need. Simple, predictable, recession-proof, even, because no matter what the economy does, pipes still burst, hinges still break, and people still need to fix things. That is the version that sounds good on paper, and if it were that simple, every street corner in America would have 3 of them. The truth is that an independent hardware store is one of the most financially complex businesses in all of retail. Not because the products are complicated, not because the customers are difficult, but because the way money moves through this business is almost entirely invisible from the outside. You can walk into a hardware store on a busy Saturday, watch 40 people checking out at the register, and still have no idea whether the owner is actually making money. In most cases, the answer is more complicated than you would ever guess. So let's start at the beginning. You have the money, you have the ambition. You want to open a hardware store. Let's find out what that actually means. Before you sell a single screw, you need a building. In a mid-sized American city, think Columbus, Ohio, or Charlotte, North Carolina, commercial retail space in a decent location costs between $18-32 per square foot per year. A hardware store worth opening needs somewhere between 7,000 and 12,000 square feet of sales floor. Your lease alone before you buy a single product will run between $126,000 and just under $400,000 every year. And most landlords require 2 to 4 months upfront as a deposit, so before the doors open, you have already handed over as much as $128,000 just to hold the space. Then come the fixtures. Commercial gondola shelving systems cost between $16,000 and $52,000 to install across a mid-sized store. A retail point-of-sale system with proper inventory management capability runs between $8,000 and $25,000. Add security cameras, alarm systems, and key-cutting equipment, and you are looking at another $10,000 to $20,000 before you have hired a single person. Then there are the permits, the licenses, business insurance, liability coverage, and in many states environmental compliance paperwork, because hardware stores handle paint, solvents, and chemicals that fall under specific regulatory categories. Budget another $15,000 to $30,000 for that first year of compliance alone, and none of this has anything to do with the single largest expense you are about to face, because the biggest cost of opening a hardware store is not the rent, it is not the shelving, it is not the permits, it is the inventory. And this is where most people who think they understand retail are completely unprepared for what they are about to discover. A properly stocked independent hardware store carries somewhere between 20,000 and 60,000 distinct products on its shelves at any given time. Think about what that actually means. Every type of screw, bolt, nail, washer, and anchor in every conceivable size. Every grade of sandpaper from 40 grit to 400 grit. Pipe fittings in every dimension. Light switches, outlets, wire connectors, circuit breakers, paint in every finish and color. Drill bits and sizes most people do not even know exist. Plumbing O-rings, valve seats, supply lines, weather stripping, wood glue, caulk, spray lubricant, garden hose fittings, and on. Each of those products has to be purchased from a wholesaler before you can sell it to a customer. According to data from financial projection firms and industry research, stocking a 10,000 square foot independent hardware store requires between $300,000 and $500,000 in inventory. Just open the doors on day one. In total, industry sources consistently report that opening a properly equipped mid-sized community hardware store in the United States requires somewhere between $300,000 and $550,000 in total startup capital. And that is on the lean end. An Ace Hardware cooperative franchise, one of the most recognizable names in neighborhood hardware, has a total investment range that runs from $579,000 to $1,913,000, according to its own disclosure documents. So let's round to a reasonable number for a well-stocked independent store. Call it $500,000 to get the doors open. Half of that, roughly, is sitting on the shelves before you have sold anything. Now here is where the business gets genuinely interesting and genuinely dangerous. The inventory does not just sit there for free. Every dollar you put into products on a shelf costs you money just to leave it there. This is called carrying cost, and hardware retailers typically face annual carrying costs of between 20 and 30 cents for every dollar of inventory they hold. So if you have $400,000 in products on your shelves, you are spending between $80,000 and $120,000 every single year simply to maintain that inventory in sellable condition. That cost includes the opportunity cost of capital, money that could be earning interest or funding something else, plus insurance on the physical goods, property taxes assessed on inventory in many states, and the cost of damaged, expired, or deteriorating products. And hardware products absolutely do deteriorate. Caulk has a shelf life. Batteries discharge. Adhesives dry out in their tubes if they sit long enough. Spray cans lose pressure. Metal fasteners rust if the packaging is compromised. A tube of exterior caulk that sat in a back corner for 2.5 years is not a tube of exterior caulk anymore. It is a write-off. And write-offs are money that has simply vanished. This brings us to the first major concept that separates the hardware stores that survive from the ones that close within 3 years. The difference between profit and cash. Here is a scenario that actually happens to hardware store owners with alarming regularity. The store has a good month. Customers are coming in steadily. The register is ringing. At the end of the month, the owner looks at the income statement and sees a profit. But when they look at the bank account, there is almost no cash. How is that possible? Because profit is trapped inside inventory. When you sell a product, the cash comes in, but then you reorder that product to restock the shelf and the cash goes right back out. The product is gone, the cash is gone, and all you have is a shelf that needs restocking before tomorrow. A store can be genuinely profitable on paper while run on fumes in the bank account. Hardware stores are among the most vulnerable businesses of any kind to this phenomenon. The industry measures this using something called gross margin return on investment. The concept is simple. It asks, for every dollar you tie up in products on your shelves, how many dollars of gross profit do you generate? According to the North American Hardware and Paint Association, which has tracked the financial performance of independent hardware stores in the United States for over 100 years, a typical hardware store generates between $1.30 and $1.68 in gross profit for every dollar of inventory it holds. High-performing stores push that number higher. If your number is too low, your shelves are full of products that are not earning their keep. Now let's talk about what actually makes money in a hardware store, because it is not what most people assume. The items that drive the most customer traffic, power tools, branded paint, lumber, are often the least profitable. A cordless drill from a major brand like DeWalt or Milwaukee is priced online by Amazon, Home Depot, and Walmart. Customers know exactly what it should cost. If your price is 5% higher, they will buy it elsewhere. So power tools typically generate gross margins of only 15 to 25%. On a $200 drill, that is $30 to $50 of gross profit before expenses. Nothing special, but a set of 3 specific machine screws in an unusual thread size, a brass compression fitting for a half-inch copper pipe, a replacement carburetor needle for a specific model of lawnmower. Those carry gross margins of 55 to 70%, sometimes more. The customer needs that part today. Their sink is dripping, their deck project is stalled, their equipment is broken. They are not going home to price compare on Amazon. They are buying it from whoever has it in stock right now. And the store that has it in stock charges accordingly. This is the quiet engine of hardware store profitability. The fastener wall, rows upon rows of small bins filled with bolts, nuts, washers, anchors, and specialty screws, is often the most profitable square footage in the entire store. Those bins do not look like much, but they are generating margins that the power tool aisle never will. And there is another financial phenomenon that happens in hardware stores that almost never gets discussed. The add-on purchase. A customer walks in needing a single replacement screw for a door hinge. That screw cost 40 cents, but while they are walking to the fastener aisle, they pass the paint brushes and remember they need touch up the trim. They grab a brush, then they see the sandpaper and realize they should prep the surface first. They add sandpaper. At the checkout, they spot a bottle of wood conditioner and throw that in too. They came in for 40 cents. They leave having spent $22. This is not an accident. Hardware stores are designed around this dynamic. The layout, the merchandising, the placement of related items near each other, all of it is engineered to expand what the industry calls the average order value. Industry data shows that typical independent hardware transactions run between $18 and $19 on average. Every time a knowledgeable employee asks a customer what project they are working on, and then walks them to 3 related products they had not thought about, that number goes up. And in a business operating on 2 to 4% net profit margins, raising the average transaction by $5 across 200 transactions a day changes the annual financial picture completely. If you are finding this breakdown genuinely useful and want to keep going deeper on how businesses actually work, this is exactly the kind of content we cover on this channel. Consider subscribing and hitting the like button. It helps more people find videos like this one. Now let's talk about the one variable in hardware retail that most business plans completely underestimate: seasonality. Hardware demand in the United States does not flow evenly through the year. It surges and retreats in a very predictable seasonal pattern. and a store that does not manage that pattern carefully will find itself in serious cash trouble. Spring is the primary revenue season. Lawn and garden products, deck stains, exterior paint, irrigation parts, gardening tools, all of this demand concentrates in March through May. Customers who have been cooped up all winter emerge and suddenly want to fix everything. Summer extends the wave, with outdoor construction, roofing supplies, and cooling equipment driving continued volume. Autumn brings a shift to weatherization, gutter supplies, interior repairs, and heating prep. And winter, particularly in northern states, slows down dramatically for most product categories, except heating equipment, pipe insulation, ice melt, and snow removal. The financial risk here is specific. A store that does not manage its cash reserves through summer and autumn will arrive in January and February with high inventory, low sales, and a payroll that does not pause. The stores that fail, and a meaningful percentage do, often fail in the first quarter of the year, when the cash generated by the spring and summer surge has been consumed by operating costs, and the next spring surge is still 2 or 3 months away. But before we get to what makes stores fail, we need to talk about the single most important customer category in independent hardware retail. And it is not the weekend DIY homeowner who comes in on Saturday morning. It is the professional contractor, plumbers, electricians, general contractors, property managers, HVAC technicians. These are the customers who might walk in every single weekday, sometimes multiple times, buying in quantities that no retail consumer ever approaches. A plumber running a mid-size operation might spend $500 in materials on a slow day and $2,000 on a busy one. They do not browse. They know what they need, they know where it is, and they want to be in and out in 8 minutes. Industry data consistently shows that contractor and professional accounts generate between 46 and 61% of total revenue in mature, well-established independent hardware operations. 20 active contractor accounts can generate as much gross revenue as hundreds of casual Saturday shoppers. A contractor who has a trade account at your store, meaning they buy on credit and settle the invoice monthly, is unlikely to switch to a competitor over a minor price difference. The convenience of a familiar store and an account they have used for years is worth real money to them. This is why the stores that are genuinely thriving are almost always the ones that have actively built contractor relationships. They have dedicated pro counters where trade customers get served without waiting behind retail browsers. They open early, sometimes as early as 6 in the morning, because contractors start their days before most retail stores unlock their doors. They offer net 30 payment terms, and they let contractors call in orders and pick them up at noon without spending a minute browsing. Now let's address the question everyone wants answered. How does an independent hardware store survive when Home Depot and Amazon exist? Home Depot's 2,300 locations do roughly $157 billion in annual revenue. Amazon sells everything a hardware store carries and delivers it in 2 days or less. On pure price, a small independent cannot compete with either of those. So why do small stores still exist? Speed and expertise. When a water pipe bursts at 7 in the evening, you are not waiting 2 days for Amazon. When a contractor's job site is stalled because a specific fitting is missing at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, they are not driving 45 minutes to the nearest Home Depot. They are calling the hardware store that has been reliable for them for 12 years. Research on Ace Hardware, one of the most successful cooperative models in American independent hardware retail, found that customers consistently accept prices 5 to 15% higher than Home Depot in exchange for convenience and service. That premium pricing power is real, and it partially compensates for the cost disadvantages of being a small operator buying inventory without a national chain scale. Walk into Home Depot with a broken plumbing fixture and try to find someone who can identify the part, tell you what size replacement you need, and explain how to install it. You might find that person. You might not. Walk into a well-run independent with the same broken fixture and hand it to an employee who has been there for 11 years, and you are walking out with the right part and a clear explanation of exactly what to do with it. That employee just converted a frustrated repair situation into a loyal returning customer, and things are always breaking. Now, there is a cost side to the business that nobody likes to talk about, but every hardware store owner is acutely aware of. Shrinkage. Shrinkage is the industry term for inventory that disappears without generating a sale. Shoplifting. Employee theft. Physical damage. Counting errors during receiving. In a hardware store carrying 40,000 individual products with thousands of tiny items that are easy to slip into a pocket, shrinkage is a constant, grinding financial drain. Industry benchmarks typically run between 0.8 and 2% of annual revenue. On a store doing $1.5 million in annual sales, that is between $12,000 and $30,000 walking out the door every year without being paid for. The highest value targets are compact power tools, drill bits, and brass fittings, small, expensive, and easy to conceal. Organized retail crime specifically targets hardware store for exactly this type of merchandise. Managing shrinkage requires investment in security cameras, inventory scanning, and audit procedures. But the cost of not managing it is higher. Let's now look at what the numbers actually look like for a real operating hardware store in the United States. According to the North American Hardware and Paint Association's 2025 Cost of Doing Business study, which analyzed the financial reports of over 1,000 independent home improvement retailers for fiscal year 2024, the typical independent hardware store generates between $1,400,000 and $1,800,000 in annual revenue. High-profit operations exceed $2.5 million. The blended gross profit margin, meaning the percentage of revenue left over after paying for the products themselves, runs between 38 and 42% for typical stores and up to 44 to 48% for high performers. But gross profit is not what you take home. From that gross profit, you pay rent, you pay your employees, you pay your utilities, your insurance, your software subscriptions, your credit card processing fees, which typically run between 1.5 and 3% of every transaction and are almost never factored correctly into projections. You pay for shrinkage, you pay for freight, and you service whatever debt you took on to open the store. After all of that, the typical independent hardware store earns a net profit before taxes of between 2.5% and 4% of revenue. On a store doing $1.5 million in sales, that is between $37,000 and $60,000 in profit per year. That is not a large number. That is the number that explains why most hardware store owners are not wealthy from the store itself. Many owners supplement their income by drawing a salary from the business as its primary manager and then taking additional profit distributions when the business performs well. The North American Hardware and Paint Association's own data shows that typical hardware store owner-operators earn somewhere between $50,000 and $150,000 per year in combined salary and profit when accounting for both, with outcomes heavily tied to store volume, location, and how effectively inventory is managed. The high-profit stores, the ones in the top tier of the industry's performance data, tell a different story. They achieve net profit margins approaching 6 to 10%. They turn their inventory 2.5 to 4 times per year rather than the typical 1.5 to 2 times. They have contractor accounts representing a large percentage of revenue. They have invested in technology, inventory management software that flags slow-moving products, automated reorder triggers that prevent stockouts on high-velocity items, and demand forecasting tools that reduce the risk of ordering too much of the wrong thing at the wrong time of year. And they have built relationships in their local communities that no national chain can replicate. There are currently just under 14,300 hardware store businesses operating in the United States, according to IBISWorld's 2025 industry data, generating approximately $45 billion in annual revenue. Home Depot and Lowe's control the largest share of home improvement spending in America, but the independent channel continues to exist and, in certain markets, genuinely grow. Because the need for a convenient, knowledgeable, locally trusted source of repair supplies is not something a warehouse store an hour away can replace. The stores that fail share recognizable patterns. They open with insufficient working capital, which means they cannot survive the first winter. They buy too much inventory in categories that do not move in their specific market, locking cash in slow-moving products. They choose locations with inadequate foot traffic or too far from the contractor corridors where trade work actually concentrates. They fail to build contractor accounts, which means their revenue lives and dies with weekend retail traffic that is highly seasonal and highly price-sensitive. They price everything competitively on the wrong items. The high-visibility branded products where customers compare, while failing to capture the healthy margins on the specialty, urgency-driven purchases that the smart operators bank on. The stores that thrive are almost predictable in their strategy. They know their local housing stock, meaning they know what kinds of homes are in their area, how old the plumbing is, what kind of wiring those houses have, and therefore what repair parts they should be overstocked on. They build contractor relationships early and protect them fiercely. They employ at least a handful of people who genuinely know what they are talking about. They run lean on slow-moving inventory and deep on high-velocity items. And they manage their cash with the kind of discipline that most small business owners do not naturally apply until they have survived their first close call. Before we wrap up, there is one thing you should check out. There is a detailed business guide linked in the description and pinned in the first comment below. It covers the fundamentals of building and running a business and is worth going through if this kind of breakdown interests you. Now let's do the math on 2 realistic scenarios, because this is where everything becomes concrete. Scenario 1. Things go well. You open a mid-size independent store in a growing residential area near an active contractor corridor. You invest $500,000 in startup costs. You spend the